Welcome to the Foundation Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. Welcome to this episode of the Foundation Series. I'm Matt McFarlane, and today I'm joined by Arif Ender, Director of Compensation for Palo Alto Networks and someone who's spent time at incredible brands like Facebook and Mars. He's one of the sharpest total rewards operators in the market, so I'm excited for today's conversation where we're going to unpack the strategic differentiator companies like Meta use and how you can replicate it. We'll talk about what to do first when you scale from 5,000 to 50,000 employees. And we'll talk about where organizations are getting the EU Pay Transparency right and sorely wrong. So if you're building comp at scale, this episode is for you. This is obviously going to be a big year for you guys, right? So Pay Transparency Directive is coming into play. Any big things that you have to get done before that lands, or what's it looking like this year?
Yeah, it's a big, actually, it's not much, only 5 months left. The thing is, we've been preparing, almost since last January. So it's been already a year that we are preparing, at least in my current scope and with my team. And yet, are we ready? I can't say yes, because it's really bigger than what a lot of people think. I feel like my peers and my network, when I really read, even on LinkedIn, people kind of really, I would say, underestimate. And the level of underestimation is probably because we are very data-driven people, as a nature of our job. They look at it, okay, it's statistical modeling, regression, and all that. I mean, it's more than that. To be honest, if you ask me, that was really the easiest part. Right now, we are in a stage that we are going into more change management, communication, and enablement, training, and that part is the biggest hurdle, I will say. We are feeling the stress a bit more because we started really auditing the HR processes and, looking at it from, are they unbiased? Are they gender neutral? And all that stuff that the directive requires us to do. And the outcome of it, there are a lot of fundamental and foundational changes you need to make. I mean, you do that. It's not okay, I changed my whole job architecture. Well, you can't do that. I mean, at the end, the machine is already running. So you need to communicate, align, then, actually influence people to get those changes happening.
Yeah, it's a big piece of work, because it's not just identifying the gaps and the discrepancies, right? It's obviously putting in place a fix to make sure that you don't see the gaps emerge again. It's about preventing it for, going forward, right? And like you said, running the modeling, identifying where maybe, either bias or inconsistency has crept in the past is one thing, but putting in place the practices that are going to prevent it from happening again across, how many employees is Palo Alto Networks?
We are getting close to 17,000, but we have a big M&A coming up. So we're going to be around more than 20,000.
Yeah. So, the complexity of a company of that size and the processes that are run that impact and result in differences in pay and benefits and all these sorts of things, equity, everything, is huge, right? So that's where the real effort sits.
It goes back to, what you want to do, but what has been done. Again, like you said, it's a massive correction phase. Let's say, you look in the past, what you have done, you have to first correct those and then also change it in a way that it doesn't happen again. So, and And obviously people were used to it for years, how we were doing compensation or how we were kind of like, looking at the job architecture. And suddenly you say, oh, a pay transparency directive is coming in, so we can't do this, we can't do that. I mean, people get an allergic reaction, especially on the business side, because again, we are creatures of rituals and
Absolutely.
habits.
Creatures of
So
habits. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the biggest hurdle, and we are just kind of, I think, jumping over it right now, currently. So let's see.
What would you say has been the biggest when it comes to helping kind of shepherd the organization towards this kind of outcome, or to embrace some of the practices for this change? What do you think's been the biggest lever, the biggest, the thing that they've most responded to in terms of helping, take these steps forward?
I'll say, like, explaining very clearly what the business impact is and to their outcomes. So very, very good, and quite the problem. One of the most visible parts of the directives is obviously the fines and penalties and reputation and legal risk. I mean, it branches out, but I just did, and we are in a B2B, and we have lots of public sector clients like that. That's one of the major channels segments we have. And basically, I just went there. One thing that literally you could see in the room, like their eyes are open, and especially if they're all looking at those clients, say, guys, if we don't follow it and we don't take the corrective measures, you are excluded from public tenders. Go explain it to you. And they were like, oh,
All right. So there's a very direct,
you could see that
tangible.
in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously there are like further details that we talk, but that was a great example. So if you tell them how it's gonna hit actually their goals or their outcomes, then you get some attention.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a similar impact here with our annual workplace gender equality agency report. So if you don't submit, you go on a list and you get excluded from exactly that. So yeah, for a lot of companies that sell into the government or councils or something like that, it has a real tangible impact that you can pretty easily quantify, can't you?
And again, also, I mean, the new generation, the new workforce actually really cares about this stuff way more than probably my parents' generation, even my generation is. Like, for us, maybe, I mean, I don't know. I had a list of like industries that I wouldn't like to work, but that was more like a personal preference. Right now, there is a bit more kind of awareness in the generation, and they really look at it. I'm talking to some TA specialists, not only at Palo Alto, but even in the past, like at Facebook. Like, the candidates are asking about the really reputation, the employer branding kind of stuff, like, or the recent headlines they are directly bringing into conversation. And one of the things that EU Pay Transparency Directive wants to do is kind of almost like a name shaming. So actually companies need to be really careful about that.
Especially, I'd imagine, like, yeah, you're right. Like, if they have a choice between two companies and, anyone that's at that sort of Gen Z millennial or younger, certainly looking more at employers from a values and a purpose perspective, and they're seeing whether or not there is alignment between the kind of company they want to work for and the things they want to see them doing. They obviously, like you said, have very different expectations when it comes to pay disclosures, justifications, fairness, consistency, all those sorts of things. So it's, if you're not demonstrating that publicly now, then it's very easy for people to just not apply or, have all sorts of adverse impacts.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice one, mate. Well, let's roll into it anyway. Roll into the questions. I mean, obviously, one of the things we talked about covering in this conversation, and one of the things that I'm excited about talking about with you is that kind of that scaling piece, this kind of concept that for a lot of people listening to this discussion ordinarily, or most of my audience tends to sit in that sort of like sub 500, size of company. They're all scaling, they're all growing. And I think where I'm really interested in taking this conversation is like, what's next? I obviously work and spend a lot of time with those companies building their first pay practices. But for me, I'm keen to dive really deep into like where you see companies go once they do start to hit their stride and really start to see their scale. So, maybe the first question is just at 500 versus 5,000. What do you typically see some of the big differences when it comes to the pay practices at that sort of scale?
Well, I mean, if you ask me, and if you look at my background, let's be honest, I always worked with, quite structured, I would say considerably structured places. But my last two stints, especially in tech, was a massive growth. But the growth size was also, from, let's say, I joined Facebook when they were 16,000. And at the peak before layoffs, it was 90,000. So, still you could directly see, or because I was looking at the EMEA region when I joined was maybe 1,500. At that peak, it was 11,000. So we are talking about almost 10x. So, and at that scale, it is actually, when you look at the absolute numbers, it's crazy. And I'm feeling the same here as well. Maybe the headcount is a bit more headcount growth is a bit more reserved, but we are actually we are increasing our geographical footprint. When I joined, I think I was responsible around 50 something countries. Right now it's 65 and still counting. And it's just only EMEA and LATAM, so I don't have the global scope at this point. So there's also the APAC plus North America is gonna be added to this. So I'm coming from maybe one step further, but I'll tell you,
From big to much bigger.
if you ask me, and I obviously in my network and like really close friends, they are more on that scale, the first couple of hundreds to couple of thousands. And at the end, when I really discuss with them, actually, I don't feel like a lot of things change. So the one key fundamental thing that I spotted is actually the job architecture. Leave everything else, really, and it actually, when you really think about it, by the book definition, everything starts with the job architecture, the job evaluation, then pricing, so the dreads, and the lack of it eventually, when you kind of hit probably like 5,000 plus, and if you really don't have it still at 10,000 plus, oh my god, yeah, that is the chaos. And one of the first questions, even when I was interviewing, when companies reach out, I always ask, do you have the job architecture? If not, it is a bit of a red flag for me. I will say that is the fundamental. And afterwards, if that is in place, technically, it's a matter of how solid and structured your compensation programs are and how you live that as an organization. Not only, I'm not isolating it to rewards team. Basically, is the business, is your, main stakeholders, even the broader people organization. Do they understand? Do they follow? Are they aligned with that? With your philosophy, strategy, and technically, I'm thinking, if you have the philosophy and strategy, they should kind of translate to your programs, or they should be the baseline for all the programs you create, you build, and scale. That, I believe, that makes or breaks it. If you don't have that trust, if you don't have that buy-in, create everything, it's not gonna help you.
Yeah, I hear you. So it's really about enablement, about adoption, about the practices being exhibited across the broader business rather than maybe it being driven centrally from a rewards team or a people ops team, something like that. It's really how it's being carried out through the business. Okay, so for a company that's making that transition, what have been the things that you think have helped them achieve that kind of an outcome?
Bringing the experts and giving them the environment. And when I say environment, it includes, I'm not talking about like really the culture. I think that's, anyway, if you ask me personally, I believe in the culture and values a lot. Those are the like two key things, but I'm not going to go to that philosophical side. I'm really talking about like really tooling, let's say, in a very basic essence. You need to give that to make it, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, like if you are at that startup scale up stage, the funding, even if you are really funded well, you have probably quite a high burn rates because you want to grow and everything. And how much of it do you allocate to, let's say, G&A function? Like generally, if you look at it, like the top key employees, either product engineering or like go to market. So when is the first HR person or comes into play? It's like when you hit probably the couple of hundreds, and then maybe they start growing. And in that case, the first key employees, even in your HR people, has to be really has to have that expertise. Plus, again, you have to be super efficient. So if you ask me, I think investing in tooling that really makes those teams efficient really pays off. And in most of the cases, personally, I still look back and what really made Facebook great place to scale and to work with, in the essence, still I didn't see anything kind of at the same level, to be honest, is even the people engineering team. We were able to, rather than going to vendors, trying to find something and to fit it into our unique processes, and like we say, okay, we have a problem, we need this, boom, be it 2 months, 3 months, whatever the roadmap they have, or like what's the complexity of that tooling is, it was internally built. It was insane.
Yeah, it was custom made for you, right?
I always
Wow.
give the same example. I think it was my first year, maybe second year, like around 2018, where we really started growing crazy. And we were like 3 people in EMEA, only myself. And at that time, I was only responsible for G&A functions in EMEA. I approved by myself 800 offers. And these are the offers that doesn't go standardized, like they are not pre-approved. And there we said, like, we can't go like this. Like, it's impossible.
So what kind of a change in velocity was that then? So you were doing 800 in a year, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And what was it previously?
Yeah, I will say 200, 300.
Okay. That's it. Okay. So 4x.
It was I think probably, even
so you
if
probably offset three other headcount.
Mark
Yeah.
goes and say we're going to hire 10,000 engineers. We are talking about that time, like suddenly around from 18, 19,000, we became roughly right away doubled it within a year, within 18 months or so. I'm talking about that era. Yeah, I think it was 18 and 19. So how do you cope with that? And I always say, like, I think their internal recruiting tooling is one of the best SaaS spin-off. It could be one of the best SaaS tool, by the way. But they scale it in a way and created this whole offer approval process in an internal tooling. And we also had to like really look back how much can we flex and how loose can we from comp perspective without like losing the pay equity and the programmatic outliers and stuff. Let's bring in. So again, going back, I have the domain expertise. I know where I can flex, what I can do, what I cannot do. Comes with the tooling or like basically being able to create that. process and the workflows and the tools. When they are combined, it was like really seamless. And I see that a lot of people is having that pain.
Yeah. You're jumping right ahead to like what I was going to leave as my last question, but it's so interesting around. I mean, you obviously have a pretty unique advantage in the sense with, I think you're a member of WorldatWork. Is that right? Yeah. So you're part of the team there. You obviously have a pretty broad purview across rewards in a global context. You engage with a lot of people in teams. How often do you see something like that, like what you've just described at Facebook?
The lack of it, or
I
I didn't hear that a lot. Like really, I mean, here and there, but like a holistically as a kind of a people strategy and how it's backed up. I didn't see much. And again, I totally get it. Like for instance, we also have that strategy in place, but it's also like, I mean, it goes back to financial, headcount allocation. Obviously, there is a price to pay, but if you ask me, that is one of the things that you need to, as a rewards professional, or again, like as a people leader, you need to go and explain really well to your finance peers, how actually in the long term, actually it's cheaper to get even two software engineers, like one product manager, to build your HR processes and tooling. I'm sure, it is gonna be cheaper in the long term.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that, and I like like any good podcast host, I think these days there's inevitably a question around AI, and I was reluctant to dive into it too soon, but I mean, I can't help but ask, like, do you not see some of the tools we're seeing with Claude Code, with Lovable, with some of the, Gemini's got a version where, you can essentially come up with a concept and you can have a working feature or a product in relatively quick succession. I mean, for me, that just increases the impetus, the fact that it's, even easier for you to have something like this relatively quickly and without having to even engage a software engineer, that if anything, there's more pressure for teams to be able to have these kind of things.
Now you have like, for almost like $50 or something like that, you actually have almost one of the best engineering platform, Claude Code. I mean, it's my, personal hobby, but like literally over the weekend, I was doing it in Google Sheets. I built myself an internal family finance tracker. And I'm a little bit close to coding and stuff, but I mean, it was in the university years. But technically, I mean, I cannot code. But it is so easy to do that right now. I mean, obviously, I mean, again, like there's information security if you have access to that. Again, one of the perks of working in cybersecurity, we are naturally a bit pessimistic, getting access to different tools. But I mean, technically, if you are able to do that, and for the new startup scale-ups, I'm sure this will be way more possible.
I mean, what you're talking about is fundamentally, what was previously a competitive edge that only a company like Facebook or Google or whoever were able to afford has now been democratized enormously, right? Like anyone, as you said, anyone can whip out their laptop, they can go to Claude Code or something, Replit, whatever. They can start to create some of these concepts that can have a very tangible impact on how long it takes them to do things, all sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. Like really, you were spot on that. Like I mean, if I would have that access, probably I would already started using and creating some of the tools that I have, that I'm maybe spending with manual copies and pay. Like we still do that, and if you ask me, it's really it's not adding value, and a lot of companies are still trying to kind of build shared service centers and moving people to like I mean, let's sit down and see, like I mean, at the end, I felt that pain very early in my days, like one of those big ERPs, I mean, we have to use it because the whole company uses it, that everything is there. But if it doesn't work for you, and then if you are, and that's the biggest red flag for a lot of processes. If your tool forces you to shape the process you want, well, I mean, you got to think about it. Just because you have to use that ERP, you have to actually do something else than what you should do in your process, even one or two steps in it. I would really, sit down, think about it, and look for other alternatives. And with these vibe coding, with these platforms right now, it's so easy, like put a really good prompt, explain your business process. I mean, hopefully within a couple of days, I'll give 1 week, you'll have that ready to deploy.
It's a real warning sign for incumbent technology platforms, isn't it? That, that their competitors are no longer the other logos that they used to look at. It's vibe coding. It's the fact that people can potentially produce their own feature that you were previously, the sole provider of. And now you've really got to make sure that you're creating something that people can implement in a way that works for them, rather than them having to adapt and then work within the way you've envisioned the process, right?
Again, it's all about investment, and I see that after those 22, 23 layoffs, a lot of companies are going back to prioritizing, obviously, the financial aspect. And I get it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the way they need to stay alive. But there is one thing that I feel like a lot of these culture changes happening is gonna bite them back when the market's gonna. I mean, it's cyclical, and employees are generally people don't forget. So, and to be honest, maybe it's gonna hit you in your books a little bit more, but still trying to be people-centric should be the key, and to enable them and to give them like really the right tools to make an impact. Then people do it, But right now, I don't think we are at that era, at that phase.
No, I mean, I certainly don't hear a lot of this sort of discussion in the teams that I either work with or speak to, or something like that. But I want to, so firstly, I'll put my hand up and say, so I personally haven't actually played with Claude Code yet. So I've literally got what is it, like a tutorial loaded up on my computer, like to have a bit of a look through it. But what I want to do, like, so even though it maybe is not something that you're using it in the environment that you're at right now, if you were to speak to somebody, that's listening and say, hey, between now and, reaching a level of proficiency with Claude Code where you probably could produce something that actually, a few hours, a few days, it could actually have an impact in your team, what would be that roadmap? So you mentioned that you obviously had a bit of a background in coding from university, so you've got some familiarity with Claude Code, and I have heard that it's something that requires a little bit of understanding of code. But if someone was like me, going from zero to the environment that I just mentioned, where we're able to actually use the tool effectively, what are some of the things that you would tell people to either brush up on or get familiar with, or whatever, to reach that level of proficiency?
Well, to be honest, like I was so far away, like even the languages that I used in the past, like PHP and, I mean, they're still out there, but right now all these front end, back end frameworks and everything. So I think it's just being familiar, like, the best I mean, what I've done is like, I literally just searched on the internet, on YouTube, the latest best practices in software engineering for front end, back end programming. Like this was my, what do you call, search query. Then I like really just read, what is it? Just watched a couple of videos. Probably I maybe just watched like 10, 15 videos and then basically how to effectively use Claude Code. I mean, I prefer Claude Code. I mean, it could be Gemini, obviously, and others, ChatGPT. Like basically, I just want like what are the best practices to Claude Code for effective, building effective products. I just followed that. There are so many templates. That for prompt templates. You use Claude to create to
To
create
create the template to prompt Claude.
I mean, uh, I really also didn't spend that much. And as you read, I mean, if you already have that kind of interest, anyway, you start learning. I mean, because it also prompts back. Like I need to do this in Next.js. I say, okay, what is it? Then I start searching. What does that mean?
So you're
So
watching a video as it's
it is
prompting back
also
to you.
learning
Yeah.
by doing. So again,
Yeah.
if you really like learning, I mean, it is an amazing fun process. By the way, at least personally, I really enjoy. So I mean, it's just two birds with one stone. Like you learn new skills, you get what you need, and probably in a faster pace and cheaper.
It's amazing that it's that simple. I mean, that was literally the path I was going to take, which was, and again, like you said, there's so many videos out there. There's so many YouTube videos that are free. I mean, you got to deal with the ads, but you have a look at how to use this thing. You brush up a little bit on a couple of the words that it spits out that you're unfamiliar with. And then after 3 hours of videos, max, maybe 4 hours, you've kind of got the ability to work with this technology that can fundamentally run a process or streamline something. I mean, I would be surprised if you didn't get that time back in the first one or two prototypes that you build for a problem you might be trying to solve, right?
Like, I mean, again, like I'm just in the latest project I had, about just maintaining my own family financials. Every month I have a slot for at least 2 hours, to update the investments, their current price. I mean, it was like really, it's quite
I'm going to have to get this off you because I did the same thing.
Yeah, and literally right now I'm just clicking one to fetch all the stock prices. It automatically syncs. The only thing that I still do, obviously, I cannot connect to the bank systems. I just download that monthly CSV, upload it, and in the backend, it categorized by AI all the expense types. And I mean, I couldn't even do it. Like I didn't have the breakdown how much I'm spending because I don't have the time to go through 400 transactions and see, okay, is this groceries? Like now AI does that. And I get it running, and technically it's gonna give me way better insights and details for probably a fraction of what I'm doing monthly. And again, like going back to that, it's exactly the same mentality for HR processes. Like how, like really, if you just, I'm coming with right away a starter idea. Like, you can easily create a market pricing tool, like again, maybe you still upload a CSV file or so, which is, I mean, still okay. I mean, you just download it and by the way, if you give Claude that template, it actually creates a specific parser for that. So you don't have to even fill a certain basic template as well. You can even directly put the survey results into it and create your market pricing tool.
And then suddenly you can give it to hiring managers, talent acquisition have got it. Like you're not having to be the gatekeeper for this information because you've just empowered the whole business to work with it, right?
But how solid it's gonna be, I think what I realized, you have to know that, I mean, you should have that domain expertise. And that's why I'm saying, like, the one thing, if I really look back from my ex-colleagues or current colleagues, who worked in those fast-scale environments and the companies they worked and how their talent strategy was, and that includes again Facebook and even Palo Alto, and like I mean, when I really Google, I think does the same. it seems down leveling, but they're bringing the best people fitting into the role. Doesn't matter, like, and they are specifically looking people for, who wants to make impact. They are not obsessed with titles. They are taken care of very well from a compound like rewards perspective, from packages perspective. That's the key. You gotta pay the man. Like, I mean, talent is a commodity, like basically. But you bring that expertise and let that be, because they've done it, they know it, and that is the key. I mean, if you don't know if you don't know the whole process and what could go wrong or what could go right, well, I mean, yeah, obviously you'll get a very simple workflow, which is fine, which will work. But devil is always in the details, and especially as you scale, all those exceptions or deviations will pop up. So you need to have that experience. Somebody worked with those exceptions or outliers, whatever could be deviations, let's say, to think ahead and build a really bulletproof process for you or program.
Well, I think it just goes to say as well, like why the people team are the people that should be building some of these things for themselves, right? Like they shouldn't really be, outsourcing them in some respects, whether it's because they've bought a piece of tech in that, you have to fit to their process, or you're speaking to the development team who, they might be the end user or the recipient or receiver or something, but they don't understand all of the stuff that goes from start to end to get to deliver the outcome necessarily. But yeah, I mean, to me, it just means, it makes me think, gosh, there really is a place for, in the people team of the future, of someone who really is amongst that team, building these tools with them hand in hand, and kind of his ground and has a background in the people space that can make sure that expertise isn't lost in the workflow.
Again, I mean, obviously you always start simple, and one key thing I learned, and that wasn't my muscle, is ship now, improve later. That is still important. I'm not saying that, but you should be able to think, along the way. Yeah, obviously, I mean, there is an MVP. Ship it, as a program, but you need to be super flexible and thinking ahead of it, because what you do in the US doesn't apply to Europe or the rest of the world. I mean, just a very basic example. One of the things that this is probably like more than half of my career, I work with US headquartered companies. The one thing I can't complain about them is they prioritize, which is fine. Most of the headcount is always sits in North America. They prioritize US, and it's rest of the look, man, like rest of the world is almost 200 countries, different languages, cultures, labor law, regulate. It's totally different. Like you can't slot everything into one bucket or try to, we do this in the US. Well, I mean, yeah, go explain it to a works council in Germany, or I don't know, the regulations in Australia, or reporting requirements somewhere else. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
I'm laughing a little bit because I feel like there's been some times in my career where I've had people with that sort of perspective as well, where they sort of see it as two. It's California and the rest of the US.
Yeah, even within US, they say that. Like, as I'm even like, scaling it. I mean, I've seen like a lot of. I heard so many times that reply, but we've been doing this in the US. Look, it's not the same. So, and that's why I think, especially if a startup or a scale up is scaling geographically, one of the key hires they should have is like really someone with an international and global talent, and be very diligent about it. Like somebody working on geographical scope, with a broader geographical scope and responsibility, is gonna bring you massive value as you go. And it's, again, you won't feel it in the short term. The problem starts when you start settling. I will say probably around this 16, 20,000 people, where you almost have the global coverage, probably 20, 30, 40 plus countries. Then you start saying, oh, like my policy doesn't help, so I need to deviate for this country, or ER issues start popping up. I mean, if you don't want to go crazy with those problems probably in the next 3, 4, 5 years, just really getting the talent with that expertise beforehand probably will save you way more headcount than bumping up your ER headcount or HRBP headcount. Like, I'm just really very key hires that you would need to sort those problems out. That would save you actually money.
Yeah, you're hitting on something I was really eager to speak to you about, which is this. I was thinking of it more from, and this is just speaking to, I guess, more my experience with startups from an Australian lens. Is that typically they get a bit of traction in the Australian market, and then as they start to mature, they get they get bigger, and then they tend to relocate their headquarters to the US, or they start to expand their footprint internationally. And so you're saying one of the first best moves that they can make in that circumstance is by bring in some headcount with expertise in that geography. Make sure that they're coming at your, I guess, comp expansion with the lens of having been grounded in that culture, in the laws, all those sorts of things. What then tends to be, in your experience, the first sort of pillar after that? So you've hired that person. How else do you tend to see? And maybe headquartering, in the US is a great example that you can use. But like, how then do you tend to see companies change their comp approach once something like that happens?
And that's a painful change, by the way. It is stabilizing the processes and making it a bit more structured, which kind of loses the flexibility. But that is still the key. What I'm trying to say is, you're going to start probably creating offer guidelines, and the ranges, and then certain limitations that you can't do this, you can't do that, that there are like caps for sign-on bonuses or equity range. What are you going to just basically streamlining, structuring, putting things into like some rules, procedures. It sounds boring, but you have to do that. I mean, unfortunately, you have to do that because you cannot go that road. Again, we talk about the EU Pay Transparency. I mean, you can't hire anyone at any cost at this point doing the same job. You need to have a structure. Like, the whole directive actually requires you to have the job architecture. Because I'm always hearing, like, even just reading some posts from some CEOs or founders on LinkedIn, hire at all costs.
They read well on LinkedIn, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. And again, I'm definitely, like, as I think I already mentioned once or twice, for me, talent is a commodity. If you want to get really the A talent, yeah, you're gonna pay the price. There is no cheap good talent. I mean, and so I'm totally fine with that. But sometimes you need to, I mean, if you already have the strategy, and I'm, again, as a real life, if you tell me, like, I have a peer group of like 12 companies and I'm targeting 75th on base and maybe even 90 on total comp, perfect. I mean, you gotta follow that one. And sometimes, yes, your best talent in your top of funnel or in your funnel, maybe they're gonna get 30, 20, 40% more. Should you get that person or not? And that's the key. I don't think you should. After that point, that inflection point, or we are talking about, sometimes there will be people that will be even more expensive, and they will be probably the rock stars you think they should be for your organization. But then most important question. If that person, yeah, okay, it's fine. You can afford it. Go get that person 20, 30% more. You have 9 people maybe doing the same job. I'm giving an example. And let's be honest, especially the newer generation, they talk to each other like, compensation is not a black box anymore. Everybody knows what the other people are getting. I think especially the new rewards professionals, they should accept the fate. It wasn't that much when I started, but
Yeah,
right now everybody talks.
it's
So
everywhere.
it's
Yeah.
quite transparent, even if you don't want it. And is it really worth to demotivate 9 people just to get someone?
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious how you think the EU pay transparency may actually work against people in that regard. Like, do you think that do you anticipate seeing companies that want that 10th person, that the person they think is an A player, they want to pay that money? Do you think they'll go to the extent of giving them a different job title and varying their job enough to fool the EU pay transparency and be able to bring that but it comes at a cost still though, right? Which is that it's more admin, it's more burden. Like, how do you see this kind of manifesting when companies often want their way, right?
Great question. I'm giving one basic example. Again, you can play it. You can then inflate your job architecture. Who's going to maintain that? So then probably you need to hire a couple of either comp analysts or HROPs, whatever. You need some resources to start maintaining and cleaning that. So there will be always it's a ripple effect. There will be an aftermath of that one. And on the business side, okay, you bring that 20, 30%, you literally mess up with your averages and your pay equity. Then what's going to happen? Because the directive requires for you to do a remediation, take actions. What is the action? You cannot decrease that one person's salary. At least not in Europe. So what's going to happen? You need to bump that 9%. 9 times 10%. Actually, you could have got 3, maybe, let's say A minus people. Not maybe that one A player. But again, I'm not saying probably they will. People will probably add comment after hearing this. But like you say that the talent should be the A player. Always hire the best. It's also a matter of risk management. You could live with that. I'm not saying, just because you hired that one, like the whole EU, European Commission is gonna really coming after you. It's a risk management, obviously. Maybe that those 9 people won't care, but that guy or that woman gets 30%. But if they do, it is a risk. Are you taking it or not?
I think that's the thing, right? Is that we're seeing more and more that people do care. They have cared about fairness for a long time. It's just the fact that we haven't had transparency for a long time, and that's the new thing, right? Companies talk about it more, people talk about it more, and so this innate human expectation that if you and I are doing the same job, we'll get paid the same, is now being brought to the fore because of these changes, at a legislative, at a societal level, all these sorts of things. So you might think it's a risk you can handle as a company, but it's probably a risky approach to take if you think that you're going to keep those people engaged.
And like I said, also really stick to the values, and sticking to the values and your programs is key. If you ask me again, when I really reflect back, why Facebook was able to scale, or now Meta, was able to scale that successfully, why we were so successful in our offer acceptance and hiring the best and stuff. Well, everybody could say, yeah, because you pay loads of money. Well, our competitive landscape was different. Like, my competitors were also the best payers. So at the end, it was not just because I wanted to, but I also needed a certain talent, and that came with the price. And we were aware about that. And same here as well at Palo Alto. Like, it's a totally different kind of a skill set and experience and industry. But how we really look at it is, you know, we are trying to stick to the guidelines, and there is a philosophy behind it. Always go back to philosophy, strategy. Like, again, I'm maybe talking by the book, but there is a cascade. First, you set the philosophy that kind of is the guiding principles, and then your strategy then goes into tactical and operations. For instance, Facebook never did a counter offer to their current employees who comes, I have a competing offer. I have an offer from Google. Never. We never, and we were super clear since the start to managers, to leaders, to employees in their new hire orientation. We do not entertain counter offers.
Yeah, don't even ask.
No. And the reason behind it was about the pay equity, which was a philosophy of that. We want to be equitable and fair. It wasn't fair. And again, I'll tell you why it's not fair. Because you are going out, and which is fine. I'm not saying, like, actually, I always say, like, be always on the market. But because you are going out, interviewing, spending time on it, and successfully and well done, kudos, getting an offer. But on the other hand, there are, like, again, 9 of your peers, working crazy, their butt off, and being loyal to the company and their role. How is it fair? You come and ask me that you need to be compensated 10%, 15x% more than that. That was the talk. And again, this is a philosophy. You might in my current remit, it's different. It's different because my landscape is totally different.
And like you said, a different philosophy, a different approach.
Yeah. But again, the whole strategy and philosophy is also different. It could be okay. Like, I'm just giving an example how the philosophy cascades to your daily actions in your compensation or reward programs. And sticking to that from the start actually kind of shapes the culture as well.
All right. We've done a number of different topics. I think the last one I'd love to ask you before we close out is that we're obviously talking about this at the start of 2026. This is clearly a landmark year for the EU Pay Transparency Directive. There's a lot of work that's been done by some companies, maybe not a lot being done by some others, but in preparation for that, 2026 is obviously going to be a year of upheaval in that respect. What do you think 2027 looks like with respect to the EU Pay Transparency Directive?
Lots of reporting.
But do you think things will settle down? Do you think companies will be chasing their tail still? Like, where do you think the bulk of businesses will be?
What I see in the current state, the one thing that probably also keep people in the dark, let's say, is technically the directive cascades a lot of the nitty-gritties and details to the local bills and transposition. Yeah, basically to the current EU member states. And how many of them already even kind of have a proposal? Like, what is it? Like a really handful of them. So technically, even less than half of the member states only maybe have a proposal right now. And I think that also kind of keeps people still in the dark, and it kind of creates an environment. It's actually not too late. But you never know. Like, if you are really close to how the EU works, there are also a little bit of those, last minute people, I expect in the last, let's say, after March and April, we'll see a speed up. Once that comes, I think it is gonna be a little bit iterative as well for the first year. Companies will see, how they react or they should react. Maybe the bill is gonna be updated. So I think this year and probably even 27 is gonna be a little bit of, trial and error. But obviously, Still, if you read the follow the directive requirements, basically a lot of companies has to do a lot of reporting, about gender pay equity and stuff. So if you ask me, companies need to be ready for that from a skill set, tooling, whatever perspective. No matter what, probably you need someone who understands statistical regression and can do some, analytics and then do the reporting. So I will get ready for that as well. Um, and I mean, again, it's really, if companies still didn't get ready yet, they're gonna face a lot of challenges and probably they need to speed up, which is gonna be quite, I don't know, like it's gonna be tough at this point. But even like, what is it, 3-4 months ago, there were like a couple of round tables, forums. Still, half of the room barely started. Let's say, I'm being optimistic. Is again, if you ask me, it's a bit late, but I hope they are way faster than us, or else it's gonna be really painful.
It sounds like it. So yeah, still a lot of change, probably a lot of iteration. Recommend getting some analytical skill sets in the team to make sure that you're sort of future ready by the sounds of it.
And one more thing, last thing, and this is one of the really observations I had, really going back to those different cultures, or like the US versus rest of the world kind of stuff. Pick France Gender Equality Index. Why countries came up, and I think Australia has the same. Certain aspects of Australia gender pay gap, reporting. They try to fix their social issues. Like really, if you really look at it, because one of the things is in France is, and it's, I think it's quite a high amount of score in the overall score. Like, is basically how many of the women who return from maternity leave gets a salary increase. Doesn't make sense to someone who is not living in France, or maybe no exposure as an experience to France. It doesn't make sense. Like, why is this scored, or why do I have to do that? Or US companies say, like, it's my policy, I don't care. Well, dude, this is a social issue in France. This was historically French companies actually penalized the women who went on maternity leave, and it was kind of almost a standard procedure not getting a merit increase because you were off for the majority of the year.
Yeah.
But what French government did, they put it into and give quite a hefty score, a sub-score, just for that data point. And you see that, and basically, if you are a US headquartered and want to expand, or basically geographically, always look at those social or cultural aspects of what is required in the legislation. Look at the market practices. I think I gave in the previous podcast, or discussions we posted with others. One of the, like, for me, that's one of the things I even just give my new junior analysts and stuff. Like, it was hilarious when I was working at Mars. We were like really opening a new entity and a factory in Nigeria, and it was my first exposure to Nigeria. So, I was told, like, yo, go create all the reward structures. Fine. What is it? Like, I get the salary survey, map it, price it, get it done, and I follow the standard guidelines, how we create the general compensation structures. I gave it to the recruiting, go start hiring. A couple of weeks later, like a month later, they come like, we can't hire anyone. So, like, how come? No, it's not that they're not accepting. Okay, what is the current comp? Basically, are we providing less? No, but nobody accepts it. I mean, these are the current comp. Actually, that's really interesting. That's weird. Then I start like really just going into the like talking to people, and actually talk to a couple of candidates, like especially like head of sales, kind of, senior leadership. They told me, and super specific nuance for Nigerian market, that there are like around 40 different types of allowances. And we were super simplistic at Mars. You have basic salary, have a guaranteed allowance, which kind of we combine and put it as a one allowance number. And basically variable pay, whatever. Like technically in total comp, I'm competitive. Actually, pretty competitive. Psychologically, when people didn't see generator allowance, Christmas bonus, I don't know what, people said like, yeah, this is not competitive.
Yeah,
I
hear you.
literally
Just
got
because
that
it wasn't
number,
a line
broke it
item.
down,
Yeah.
and literally offer acceptance was almost 100. Like basically we hired everyone for the ramp up of the factory. So it's an amazing example how culture, social, like the society culture shapes your comp practices and markets. So you can't be, I do it my way and that's no way.
Yeah, it really pays to have that local insight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've certainly learned some things in this podcast. I've got a few takeaways, mate. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for jumping on. And yeah, I appreciate it. I'm glad we could finally do this.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this one, but I also really appreciate you gave me this opportunity. It's always really fun to talk to you as well, even on a personal note. And
I appreciate it.
I hope we'll continue these discussions. I have lots of stories to tell, Matt.
I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions out of this one, that's for sure. So yeah, I think there's definitely going to have to be a round 2 on the cards. But mate, I appreciate it. I'll let you get on with your days.
Thank you so much, and hopefully it's gonna be a great year for you as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.